hit play. I'm glad you actually remembered that. Hit it.
Big green record.
Bid it. Hit it. Not bid it.
Hit it. Quit
Hi.
Checking your
I'm
maker?
checking out my makeup. No, I was checking out this blue thing here that's unattractive.
Oh, yeah.
But that's
it.
let's move ourselves. It's okay. It's okay. We are per usual. Yeah, we can come closer.
Look. That's it.
Oh, look at that. Wow. The magic of the hand.
We're not live, bro.
Yeah, we are. We're live.
No,
Yes, we are. We're
Are we?
live. See? And now you've got your stuff on the other
Well,
side. So we can move the camera toward
we
us.
can move this toward
Look
us.
at that. Okay, you do that.
Get a lot
That's
of
it's a big man job there. Okay. Whoa. Okay.
Whoa.
Wow. Okay. Now we're gonna a little here. Move a little closer to
Okay.
me. This way. Look, okay, we're getting there so close. Okay. That's close. That's pretty good.
It's a bit too close.
It's a bit too close. How's my hair? Okay, so remember in The Wire,
Just
right at
perfect.
the when Felicia says right before she's gonna get killed, she goes, "How's my hair?
Yeah.
How's my hair look?"
You should put on your headphones.
Yeah, really? Why is that more professional? Okay,
It gives you a more intimate relationship
that's what I'm
with
going for here, a more intimate relationship. Okay, here we go. Hi,
Hello.
everyone. It is
Hello.
what's today? Tuesday?
Yes.
Tuesday afternoon.
As a matter of fact.
Matt Welch has been very, very, very busily writing some awesome stuff, including the story I just read while you were in here taping with Sir Michael Moynihan.
Mm-hmm.
Fifth Column Patreon episode. I read your piece in Reason of Today, I believe, about LA and not LA, but the COVID, the scare 'em tactics. I have a question for you.
Yes.
And something I've said on this podcast before and something I've written. Well, first of all, hi, I'm Nancy Rommelman.
Hi, I'm Nancy Rommelman.
And this is the Paloma Media Podcast. I have said before, I believe, including on this podcast, that I firmly believe it is the journalist's job to gather the best information he or she can, lay it on the ground, try to understand it, and put it into a form that you can offer to the reader in a way that makes, in the calmest possible way that you can, that allows them to make good, sound, informed decisions for themselves and their family. If that's not your job as a job, we're not like Kitty Kelly delivering, whoever. No one is going to know who that is, and I actually don't even really know who that is, except as a name, a gossip columnist. But
Sure, them books, man. Those are good.
And I really believe that is your job. The article that you cited today from this journalist in the New York Times, who's I think your term today, you call it pretty shoddy reporting, it really seems designed to continue to keep parents insecure, afraid. And I don't know if there's something worse than scaring people about their children.
The proximate cause. So this is a piece that ran on Monday in the New York Times by Apurva Mandavili. And I apologize for however I can pronounce Rommelman sometimes. But the cause of the article was not actually about, hey, schools are infectious hell baths, although that was kind of a takeaway from it. But it was more or less an encouragement to get the vaccine approved for kids between the ages of 5 and 11, which is now on the table, now that there's been some trials done. And so the FDA is going, and it was sort of pushing in that direction. And as part of that, she posited that the Delta surge has been fueled by schools reopening, which isn't true. It's just really,
and it's demonstrably not true.
It's super not true. Like, you can go to the CDC and they got the little lines and the graphs, and they do it by day. And you can see a number of hospitalizations. It was super low on June 28th. And then it starts going up, goes up. Think to yourself, what happens on June 28th? Is that when schools open? Or anyways, I don't mean to be sarcastic, but I'm kind of sarcastic at this point because it's 18 months into this. We've seen what happens all over the world with schools opening, with very rare exceptions. They don't cause there to be super spreader events, in the words of former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, when he was scaremongering about that too. Like, we just know enough by now. People have opened schools, in the case of Europe, without masks predominantly in most of the countries, and they've been all right. The UK did it during the Delta variant.
The UK never masked kids, correct?
They might have masked kids for a bit,
little bit at the beginning.
last year, but
Right.
during this summer and this fall, like when the Delta was hitting, the Delta is more infectious, it's scarier. Thankfully, it's not scarier in terms of it being more potent. In terms of what happens to the average person who gets it, it's just that you spread it easier. So of course it's going to be scary, and of course it's going to be scary. Particularly in a time of vaccination where everyone else is getting vaccinated. So like, oh my God, who's not vaccinated? It's my 6-year-old. And I do have a 6-year-old and I hope she's watching. Hi, Coco.
Hi, Cokes.
But it still remains the underlying things about of COVID-19 are the same with the Delta variant, which is that kids predominantly disproportionately compared to the rest of the population don't get it, don't spread it, don't suffer from it. And in that context, it's important to give information that is helpful, as Nancy sort of said at the outset, instead of saying that the Delta surge was fueled by opening schools. That's just not at all what happened.
So
it's not.
Two things. One, we had this conversation at lunch recently. I was like, what are the numbers of kids that die of the flu in a flu season compared to right now? We know that, there have obviously been some deaths of children, though I guess the last time I checked, what was the numbers under the age of 18 for the entire
439.
That's okay. So that's since we know COVID began, right? Hi, we don't need that. So, and then in terms of what's going on with Delta, or just what's been going on for the past 5 months, you compared the deaths that have happened in the past 5 months with the flu deaths, what was from 2017, 2018, something like that.
So the one context is Dr. Michael Osterholm, who's been a big talking head about this stuff. He's the head of the University of Minnesota's pediatric children's of whatever. And he was on, I believe, CNBC 2 days ago. And he said, and this is close to an exact quote, the fact of the matter is we know that right now kids are dying at a much higher rate than in any flu season in memory. I'm like, gosh, that sounds scary. I don't want my 6-year-old, hi Coco, to be vulnerable to the flu. So let's go look at that up. It's Norm Macdonald voice for everybody. And 2017, 2018, 5 months, 172 kids are estimated to have died. People under the age of 18 died in that flu season, 5 months. We've had since April 1st, which is when Delta took off here, and it's also when the vaccination is big. So as 5 months and 3 weeks, 146.
Okay,
so that's not much. That's not a triple much. It's not a double much. It's not a single much. It's not anything of those things. It's less. And this is a guy who's on TV all the time talking about the science.
Okay, so my question, and I'll open this up to the class. And I'm actually not being naive here, because there's a lot of times we're going to say like, oh, I know why those people are doing that, because they're like little agenda. What could possibly be the reason that you want to continue to keep people so fraught and insecure? Is it because people like the feeling of being in an emergency? Why would the New York Times do this? What is in it for them to do this?
I mean, I think it's important to point out that the New York Times is vast and contains multitudes. On the same day that we have Purva Mandavili, who writes she's been pretty alarmist throughout the pandemic. Right. You have David Leonhardt, who's been kind of the opposite. And he wrote a very good piece, as he's been doing. He's like the conscience of like telling the New York Times that it's okay to be slightly more in the direction of those of us who don't want to mask everybody that moves. And
so he's kind of like the Michael Powell of the science.
He very much so. Yeah. And he wrote an excellent piece pointing out that its testing is the problem here. Like America has done a really bad job with allowing people to test quickly and often. And there's right now we're going through, thankfully, a policy phase where some places, New York has started this, and hopefully LA will too. LA County has, but the city is a different story, the Unified School District, of where you go from automatic, one kid tests positive, everybody in the class, if they're not vaccinated, so if they're under 12, has to quarantine for 10 days. That was the default. People are changing to a test to stay system where just test the hell out of kids who are in that situation. And if they're not sick, they can stay as long as they're going positive. So we're going in that direction. And I predict, and I did at the bottom of this piece, that that's going to be eventually the default this school year. But up until then, man, there's a lot of this constant kind of a fear mongering. And you ask sort of like, what's the motivation? In some cases, the motivation is just, it's natural fear from people. They fear their kids. You got to protect the kids in the middle of a sentence, and people tend to panic. And there's also, from the beginning, there's been not a moral intuition, just an intuition that kids are snotty germ factories.
Which they are.
And they totally are. They totally are. We're so lucky it didn't turn out to be the case with COVID-19. It is the case with RSV.
Yep.
And other things that are impacting pediatric ICUs even right now. But thankfully, it's not the case with COVID, but it sort of feels like it should be. But also, there's an interest group level here too, which is teachers unions in New York City, in Chicago, in Los Angeles. Teachers unions are very motivated to have the most strict either vaccine mandates for kids, which is the case in LA and Culver City, or strict testing. They test people every week in LA, vaccinated or not, which is, if I was an LA taxpayer, I might blink at that. But it produces incredible information. And as I think we've talked about here before, that information at the beginning was also misused by journalists who are like, okay, great, we have a huge raw number. Let's talk about how scary that raw number is. Like, no, dude, you got all this great information. It's telling us, for example, and we should stop talking about this because it's not even what we're supposed to be talking about.
No, and I have only one thing to add when you finish that. I know what you're going to say, but go. Kids
who were quarantined in LA, in the LA Unified School District, right? That means a little snotty Nancy tested positive. And so Matt has to go home for 10 days. They test those kids. Their positivity rate is 0.2% of the kids who are quarantined, who are testing positive at a much lower rate than the teachers who are vaccinated. Anyways, long way to say a lot of bad journalism out there, and it doesn't have to be that way. We could have done better. Come on, man.
It's the first time I've been able to say that. I will just add one thing to this. Oregon continuing to cover itself in glory. One school, I guess it was today or yesterday, four people within this one school tested positive, and I don't even know if it was all students. It could have also, some of them could have been teachers. So all 900 have to go and quarantine. And you know why? The reason they gave? Because, they knew that they should have sort of done the contact tracing thing or figured out like who had more than 15 minutes of exposure to these four, but they didn't know how to do it. So I don't know. Everyone's got to go home.
Multnomah. Ain't gonna multnomah itself.
No, that's right. Okay. Hi, everybody. As Matt named our beautiful episode today, what did I say? This podcast doesn't exist?
Doesn't exist.
This podcast doesn't exist, and we're going to prove it. So anyway, as you might imagine, we sometimes send each other stories in the mornings, things that are like causing us to have high blood pressure or things that make us super happy. So this morning I sent something to Matt, and it was a quote. It was actually a little piece on Literary Hub, where they have a lot of interesting stuff. I used to read it more than I do now. But it was a writer over there, very, very short piece talking about how there was a big interview with Jonathan Franzen, who has a new novel out. He wrote the corrections. Some of you know he wrote the corrections. He's the one that when Oprah put her sticker on the book, he was like, no, I don't like this. I spent all this time on this book and I don't like it. And she was like, oh, okay, well, guess what? We'll take the sticker off. And they did. He couldn't just like have a little grace and then like make bank, but whatever, ancient history. So he was quoted as saying, his good friend, George Packer, who writes for The Atlantic, was one of the people that signed the Harper's letter about
last summer,
July, talking about the importance of free speech and I don't know, how would you characterize it? Classical liberalism, just
not even they didn't name anything like that. Just that they pointed out in the summer post George Floyd, when all of these media institutions and liberal institutions like museums in San Francisco and stuff like that were in a panic and firing their directors or forcing resignations over any number of things that sounded a little bit on first glance to be many of them, it sounded kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Like, this person didn't post the right thing on Instagram or has a history that's much worse than they're trying to present and whatever. So there was definitely kind of an ongoing nervous breakdown. Harper's has a letter signed by 100 and some odd people.
Lots of people.
Friends of ours.
Right, including friends of ours, all across the spectrum. And Franzen said, and this is the quote I took out of it, he decided he was not, even though his friend George Packer asked him to sign the letter, he decided he wouldn't. And he said, I also think until people start being sent off to Lubyanka for having said the wrong thing to the wrong person, the risk is probably overblown. Meaning the risk to people's livelihoods or careers or, social ostracization.
Perfect.
Right. And I read that and I thought, oh, okay, so really nothing to worry about here. What we should just wait for is let's wait for the transports to happen. And once the people are being transported, or literally or figuratively, because we know that they already figuratively are being taken off to purgatory or to the sort of social gulag, then maybe we can start worrying about it. And then you alerted me to a different piece, didn't you?
Yeah, so there's been a little spate of these things. Michelle Goldberg in the New York Times had a piece that was keyed off of one from Adam Guri, and I'm going to misidentify where his essay was located, Liberal Currents. Or
Liberal
like.
Currents.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Yeah, look at that.
But in which the basic thesis is that this must be overblown in part because the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, otherwise known as FIRE, a very good bipartisan group, kind of doing what the ACLU used to do with free speech, but doing it on college campuses. Since they have only recorded 426 events since 2015, then, hey, look, there's so many colleges. That's just it's an insignificant number. So maybe it's way too overblown.
Well, the direct quote was, if any other problem in social life was occurring at this frequency and at this scale, we would consider it effectively solved. Meaning these 426 cases of people who have been, accused of something and called up and either, been fired or been blacklisted or whatever we want to call it.
Or just had their rights violated on campus.
Right. This is really nothing. This is something that that is overblown. Our good friend Katie Herzog had an interesting little repost to that today. She commented, if this line from Michelle Goldberg's latest were true, then we'd have considered police shootings of unarmed people effectively solved, right? Again, it's sort of a numbers game, right? It's like, do you take 426 to be a lot? Or do you take it to be a little? Well, I guess it depends where you're standing and what's important to you.
And also how many of these things are being measured. Murders and shootings involving officers tend to be measured. Not well,
as they should, but as they should be.
Thankfully, the Washington Post has been measuring this. Wesley Lowery was instrumental in setting that up, and all credit to him and them for doing that. And I think the FBI now has been instructed under the Biden administration to start counting those as well. That's great. We need much more of that. However, there's probably not a whole lot of those shootings that are that we don't know about. Question is, at X number of thousands of institutions of higher learning, to the extent that we care about them, and I'm not the one who cares about them the most, that's for sure. You can tell by looking at me. That are they all getting measured? I mean, because the types of things that happen don't involve someone dying in a interaction with a police officer.
Right.
They have to do with someone saying something and suffering, or doing or writing something and suffering a professional or reputational consequence. And also there's a different kind of chilling effect to it as well, of people who notice this is happening around them and say, you know what? I'm never going to talk about anything having to do with X, Y, and Z.
Well, yeah, but even before we get to that, these are the cases that FIRE has either become involved in or become aware of. I mean, the FIRE is one organization. How many tens and hundreds of thousands of employees are there? We have no way of measuring this number of how many people these sorts of professional attacks or have come upon. And yeah, and how many people don't speak up? And we absolutely and 100% know that most people are just going to shut their fucking mouths because it's
Language.
I'll go sit in the corner. You just take over, dude. No, because, and we've talked about this a lot. It's very easy for somebody to maybe don't have kids, a mortgage, responsibilities, a sick parent, or, whatever. They don't feel that they have a lot to lose. They're like, if they feel courageous about certain things, they're going to come out and say things. But like, what if you have all those things? And are you willing to take a stand that you feel is right? If you know that even if you present yourself really well and you feel really confident of it, you have the potential of being destroyed like overnight. Well, a lot of people are not going to do that.
I tape. We do a Fifth Column podcast, which we were doing an earlier one taping here, and we'll do one tomorrow. It's great to have a studio.
Mm-hmm.
It's super cool. Nancy's obviously been on 1,000 times, or at least 4. We get letters from people, right? Who talk about stuff that happens in their lives. And it isn't necessarily that they themselves get under the barrel, though many have. By many, I mean like at least a dozen people have gone through some unpleasant and even kind of career redirecting things because of their work. And this includes people who are in the military, includes a guy in his own business that he founded. They went and had to do the diversity, equity, and inclusion training, and he was found to be wanting and all this kind of stuff, and he's all confronted. So like it's affecting people in all manners, walks of life that are not media, that are not journalism, not academia, not sort of white collar thumbsuckery. It is proliferating, and the overwhelming majority of them are cases where people are basically being taught a Robin DiAngelo book and having to have a discussion about them. And they sort of talk about in their emails of do I say what I really think about this? Or do I just sit on my hands? And the majority of them sit on their hands, and I don't blame them even for half a second. Right. Thankfully, I get to read the Robin DiAngelo book under my own terms and write about it for a reason, which is a great thing about working there. But not everybody has that luxury. And to kind of flip the question on its ear is like, what is it with kind of trying to either not to pretend that it doesn't exist, but to say that it is drastically overplayed when that is a completely unreported reality that most people know people who have been affected by it. I don't understand that. I don't understand that impulse.
I don't understand your question. What are you saying?
What I'm saying is like, why are we having a season of downplaying what is called, and I don't use this phrase, cancel culture? What's the point of it when it is? I don't see how you look at the last 5 years and say there's less of it.
I think there's a couple things at play. I mean, first of all, there does seem to be sort of a generational divide, at least generational divide with people willing to talk about it. There are plenty of people that are not. I mean, our parents are not talking about this stuff. Like, what did they think? My mother wouldn't even know what it meant probably if I told her cancel culture. The people that are kind of getting a little uppity about it and talking about it, they tend to be thought of as like on, what was it? Well, Goldberg said here today, many people I know over 40, maybe 35, resent new social mores that demand outside sensitivity to causing harm. It has been jarring to them to go from an intellectual culture that prizes transgression to one that polices it. I don't know if transgression would be exactly the word I use, but I can say it is a little jarring to go to from an environment where you feel like you can kind of like say things and try things and do things to one where you are expecting that you might get your head chopped off for saying the wrong thing. Yeah, that's a little jarring. But I was going to say that, every next generation supplants the previous one. This is inevitable. We get on the conveyor belt over here, and then we fall off, right? And there are other people coming up behind us. And I get this, like, your parents' music, and then your music replaces it. I get all of this. But I think that there's the generation that is saying, you know what, this is entitlement on your part. We're trying to do better things. I think that they're not really thinking it through. I think that they think that it is some sort of selfishness to want to be able to speak our minds the way we have previously. I'm not making myself very clear, but I think people are not actually taking into consideration, number one, what actually happens to people when these cancellations happen. They somehow, they don't want to look at it. They don't want to look at the real repercussions of what happens. And they somehow tell themselves, maybe because it's comforting, that the people that get it deserve it.
That must be it to some degree, because the individual cases of not the people who did deserve it, but the people who pretty transparently did not. There are enough of them out there, or at least who had any sense of kind of due process that was transgressed, right? Or the normal way of dealing with things is suddenly changed overnight. There's enough of these cases that you have to decide that it doesn't matter, or or it's Donald McNeil's situation at the New York Times, which we've talked about before, of like, okay, maybe it wasn't a huge deal what he did, but enough of the 60-year-old guys who would even use an N-bomb in a quote, talking about an issue that was brought up to him, that so therefore it's okay. There's few enough of them that it is less important than the importance of changing these mores.
The ends justify the means.
But it is the ends justify the means. And
Right.
I've never been able to go there.
Ever. Under any circumstances, the ends never justify the means. I also have something sort of basic to say, which sounds sort of like corny or childlike. But if your methods are to kind of destroy people, because that sort of accomplishes your goal, I think you have the poison pill in you. I don't see how doing that to people ever can yield any beautiful fruit. I just don't. It's sort of like, it doesn't make any sense. I also think that something that if they think about it, they'll know that it's true. And McNeil is sort of a good example. You can make an accusation against somebody that, you can bring them to court. There can be due process. You can even have disagreements. But you have to understand, a lot of these campaigns, they're based on nothing that's true. And something that's completely false can have exactly the same effect. Okay. I mean, let's talk about, I was writing down some things today, like, let's talk about blood libel. I mean, we kind of know that Jews don't use the blood of Christian children in their religious rituals, right? We kind of know that. Well, guess what? This is still believed, and this is still used as justification for violence, or it has been historically, right? It's like, you don't actually have to bring a true accusation against someone to destroy their lives. And guess what? I know it's going to be shocking to all of you. People will do that. People will do that for their own reasons. And all of this gets sort of all mixed up into the things that we call cancel culture, that some people say, well, it doesn't really exist. And even if it does, it's getting us to a better place. I don't believe that. I don't believe that you can become deliberately cruel as an individual or as part of a movement and create a better world. I think it's impossible, actually.
And speaking as an old fart on the wrong side of all of these age things, right? Like there's probably somebody in the comments right now who refers to themselves as they, and I still can't wrap my head around it. I'm fine with it on some level, right? Like I understand. I mean, I'm not fine with personally using a plural to talk about a singular. Come on.
Yeah, don't get crazy here.
But it's more like, I'm fine with that. That the kids, my older daughter, who's hopefully not watching this because she'll be throwing stuff at the screen, has a different vocabulary for stuff, thinks that I'm old and out of touch. That's how things go. As long as she's fair to me in the process, reasonably, we're kind of good. I want the kids to have 75 different new words for whatever sexuality or music or whatever the hell they're doing. And to know that I'm not going to understand it is great.
It's fine.
That's the stuff of life. Just be fair about whoever gets lined up. And the thing that gets lost, and I think maybe this is the source of some of Nancy's at this story, is that actual individuals, including people who are not fancy lad writers for prestigious journals who can then start Substacks that get good subscriptions. People have been hurt badly by this stuff. And to be blasé in the face of that is not very human. Nancy, how many people do you know and you've communicated with over the years have been in the barrel?
I have one sitting 2 rooms away from me. But besides that, a lot. And I have had people that are so unbelievably desperate contact me saying that no matter what they do, I own this pizza place in Michigan, or I own this shop in Michigan, and I've tried, and they, my employees, this one girl made something up, but it caught fire and now they're picketing. And so I tried to do this. And then they said, well, if you let us form a union, and we didn't want to do that because we had 5 employees, but we did. And yet they still brought it and they lost everything. Or people that have reached out to help a student, and then the student decides that for whatever his reason was, that now this person is the enemy. Again, this is a really trite expression, but it's a lie travels around the world before the truth puts its pants on. And we talked about this a little today. It doesn't matter if you report a story that's inflammatory, even about COVID, and it turns out to be wrong, and you come back later and say, oh, I made a correction. That lie has gone on, baby. And the court of public opinion, people find this stuff delicious. They find lapping at the destruction and blood and guts of another person smeared there on the ground. Somehow they find it delicious. They find it delicious, I think, for a minute, and they get some sort of, feeling out of it. Oh my God, we're on the side of right. But I've said this before in a recent article. It's empty calories, babies. You wake up in the morning, you got to lap up some more of that stuff. And it is not, I find it to be really heartbreaking, not just for the people that it happens to. I find it heartbreaking for the people that they decide this is how they're going to conduct themselves. I also think that if that is the world that you build, that is the world you will live in. And if you think that is not going to happen to you, well, you better look around, because you're building the world. You are building the world that you live in. Now, I'm going to have a little caveat here. We do live in a little bit of a, we are part of the, whatever media people, and we live in, big East Coast cities. And this is not the entire world. The world is huge. Most people do not operate this way. Most people are like, whatever, I'm going to go down to the, Sonic and get a burger and hang out with my wife and watch, Fear Factor. And God bless you. I love it if you don't participate in this. But we do, as Michael Moynihan once said, he's like, yeah, I know I have first world problems, but there's still problems. It's we do live in this world, and we have many friends who have weathered this and not weathered this. I will keep writing about it. We will keep talking about it. I would love it if people would think first and be better to each other and not take pleasure from this stuff.
I mean, and building on what Nancy was saying about feeling some pity for the people who take enjoyment of being unfair to others in a way that harms them or leads to harm happening to them. I don't wake up caring about this stuff. There was some idiot writer whose name I won't mention.
I will.
Wrote a stupid hit piece about how libertarians are silent in the face of the Texas abortion law, which is just not true. And name checked me, which in my case was more or less true. But name checked Nick Gillespie from Reason, which absolutely wasn't at all. And her evidence was what we were tweeting about instead. And she just missed all the really sharp tweets from Nick in this time period that she was talking about it. But then she was saying, and all Matt Welch was writing about was cancel culture. And it's hilarious because, again, I never use the phrase. I use it here when people are thrusting it in our face. We just had 3 or 4 pieces today or this week. All these people in their cancel culture. Come on. It's so overplayed. I don't wake up caring or thinking about this. Just really don't. Occasionally the thing will fall into your lap and you want to write about that, especially if it's particularly unfair or interesting in some way. It's in kind of an ongoing media nervous breakdown, I think. It was more intense last summer for sure, but it's out there. It's kind of interesting. But I think the most important way of approaching this from a comportment standpoint is to not make this even in reaction the dominant part of your life. I mean, the point of speaking freely is to speak freely, not to bitch about the one thing every time. And I do feel sorry for people who spend a disproportionate amount of their time trying to hunt new ungood people.
They're like snouting out, like, where can I find something?
Holy cow.
I need a little more calories over here.
Wouldn't it be great if you just like went and did a journalism story, like with the article, with the writing, or painted something,
or went out
wrote
and took a run, or make some cookies, or like check in on your neighbor, just do something fun, do something that does not involve destruction. That was my metal rock voice.
Wow.
Terrible. Yay.
Wow.
Okay, so
can we turn that into a cold open?
someone will be memeing that, I'm sure, by the time we're off. Okay, guys, I'm really super excited to see all these comments. We have not been reading them at all. Matt, with me blinded as a bat.
Yeah, you can't see. BU Vandal says, and Noam Chomsky and Jeet here, who got lost on the way to the right letter. That's pretty funny, because there was this is a reference to the Harper's letter.
Yeah,
they were two of the biggest. Not Chomsky actually is not a surprise. I was surprised that Jeet here from the New Republic wrote about that, because he's been trending more in the this is not a big real problem way, and probably has some regrets, I would guess, knowing Jeet a little bit since then. But yeah, there was a lot of effort at the beginning to try to reach out and go, I'm so glad no one ever asked me to sign these things. I've signed 0 petitions in my life. I
don't want to sign petitions.
I organized, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 2 protests in my life, which will show you how deeply frivolous of a human being that I am. The first was anti-smoking ban on the campus of UC Santa Barbara, because they enforced it in the pub, which has like a 5 trillion foot ceilings.
How can you not make people smoke in bars? That's terrible.
Well, I mean,
I know. Well, all right. Oh, stop it.
Turn off your
Decline.
phone. And then the other one was they cracked down on street musicians in Prague in like 1994. Yeah. So we had like a busker in. So in all cases, I should never be involved in anything like that.
Just wanted, said, Ben Price said, friends. And I will just say to Matt, our mutual friend in London today told me that he hated the corrections with the heat of 1,000 suns. So there we go. What every people have to go? Well, yeah. Well, we're kind of bumping up against our 38-minute mark, guys. We've been super glad to have you here.
Sorry to be all like frantic and in full energy.
Yeah, you should have seen me before. I was like spitting nails. Yeah. But we will be back. Keep an eye on this space and for some other fun stuff. Oh, and if you guys, we're on Bill Schultz's show on Compound Media.
Oh, that's right, with Lizzie Wolf.
Yeah, with Liz Wolf guesting in. So that's 10. It starts like 10 a.m. Tomorrow morning, Wednesday at Compound Media. Keep your eyes peeled here.
Yeah, we'll post some clips there.
Yeah,
Busty Whimsit will.
Busty will, and we've got some good stuff coming up for you guys. So thank you for joining us. See you soon. Bye.